Welcome to Constant Variables, a podcast where we take a non-technical look at building and growing digital products. I'm Tim Bornholdt. Let's get nerdy. This episode is brought to you by the Mahonis Group. We build best-in-class iOS, Android, and web apps. We do this by integrating with teams that lack mobile expertise, and we work together to deliver creative mobile solutions that solve real business problems. To learn more about us and to see our pricing, something we're very transparent about, visit jmg.mn. That's jmg.mn. A small request before we jump into this week's episode. We're trying something new with ratings and reviewings for our show. We obviously know that these are annoying, but they're very valuable to us. So, as a thank you for actually taking the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, we will give you and or your company a shout out on the show. Leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Get free advertising. It's that simple. Even simpler, you can go to constantvariables.co/review and we will take you right there. Today we are chatting with Joe Karlsson, Senior Developer Advocate at SingleStore. Joe has a huge following online. He is hilarious. He is insightful. I love this guy, and I'm so glad that I finally got the chance to meet him. If you are a junior developer or you are interested in breaking into this industry, this episode is for you. We spend the entire episode talking about getting into software development, how juniors can break in, how we in the industry can help juniors to get into this field. It is jam-packed. So if you are looking for a new career in tech, this is the episode for you. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Joe Karlsson. Joe, welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. Tim, you and I have been internet friends here for a while, and we finally get to chat, at least virtually, and hopefully someday in real life.
I agree. I've been following you for a while on LinkedIn and just am constantly laughing at the stuff you put out on TikTok. And not only laughing, but also pretty informative. And especially for the topic we're going to be talking about today with kind of getting jobs in the tech space, I thought you were a very perfect guest for that. So I'm glad you took the time to help out here.
Oh my gosh, Tim, you can't tell, but I'm blushing right now. Thank you.
Yeah, we turned video off. So you were bragging about your gigabit Ethernet earlier. So not all of us have that luxury, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. No, thank you. I'm glad you get to put up with my my posting online. If anyone else here that's listening to, you can definitely follow me on Twitter, TikTok, or of course LinkedIn too. I'd love to connect with anyone who's listening to this too. My name's Joe Karlsson. Totally. So glad to be here.
Well, your daytime job isn't necessarily just posting awesome TikTok videos. You actually do have a job outside of that. So I'd love for you to give us an intro into yourself and what you do currently.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a developer advocate and software engineer. I currently work for a database startup called SingleStore based out of San Francisco. And previously I was at MongoDB as a developer advocate as well. I think developer advocacy is kind of a tricky thing to define. And I think every company you go to, you're even going to have like differences in what that looks like. I tend to be a content focused developer advocate though, which means I'm like producing documentation, blog posts, videos, technical talks, live streams, I don't know, whatever like kind of technical content developers need. I try to go out and figure out what that is and make it for them. Actually like, sometimes my job is posting online. You know what I mean? Like, especially in the age of COVID, like the only ways we're able to like engage with developers because we can't have online events or in-person events is Google SEO, Google, the developers searching for stuff, or them finding it organically on social. Like that's the only two places you're like reaching developers right now. So having like a strong online presence is super important.
It's kind of like how technology is just everywhere and you can't really be a business without having technology these days. It's the same with like, you can't really have a job if you're not posting something online at some point, you know?
Oh, totally. Totally. And like, honestly, like, so as a developer advocate, like the job's been around for like 20 years, but like COVID has been a major game changer. Like I've seen demand for the role just skyrocket this past year. And I think it's because everyone realized how important having an online community is, especially when we can't meet in real life. You know what I mean? Just like
Yeah.
jobs are through the roof right now. Like pay is skyrocketing and there's a ton of new positions and new companies all the time.
So really, like your role as the developer advocate then, because that was something I've been trying to figure out. I've never worked in a company large enough to require one, but effectively you're doing community building, right? Like kind of helping to the advocating you're doing is more to convince developers to come in and use the products that you're selling.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I don't think there is another. So I'm based on the Twin Cities in Minnesota, but I don't think there is another developer advocate working in the Twin Cities right now. I've tried to get it going at a couple local companies, and it hasn't really quite stuck yet. I do feel like it will be happening soon, but who knows? But anyway, it's online communities, like engaging. It's like I don't know. It depends. Like I find my job is like trying to figure out what the developer community needs and then what the business goals of the company I work for are. And I'm trying to marry the two, right? Like, the company may have new features, new things they want to like talk about. They like need to get that word out about it. I can help do that. Or like the developer community needs some sort of, then we want a new Slack channel. Cool. Let's go make that. Or we need to start answering more questions on Reddit or Slack or Stack Overflow or whatever. Cool. Let's go figure out what that looks like. Or we need like a demo with Java and Spring. Okay, let's go figure out how to make one of those, But yeah, it's like trying to like marry the two of those. It's kind of a balancing act of trying to like make the company happy, but also make the developer community happy as well,
Yeah, it's nice to have that person that's able to. I always think of the Steve Buscemi meme of hello fellow children, that kind of thing, where it feels a lot of times when you're a company that's trying to talk to developers, you don't really have a good lens by which to engage with them, and you kind of speak in your corporate terms and you talk about alignment and parking lots and whatever else. And developers are like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Totally.
So having someone like you there, that's kind of a Rosetta Stone in between to be like, okay, this is what you actually need to know. And here's what's actually helpful for your job. And kind of, not to like dismiss people that are in, those corporate environments, but sometimes it's just, there's the way you communicate, the way that you actually, can speak developer is a really a valuable skill.
Oh, totally. Well, and the thing is too, like traditional marketing and sales do not work on developers, right? Like we've all seen like mailing a brochure to a developer, that's going straight in the garbage, or email marketing campaign. Like I think developers traditionally have a super high bar for like smelling bullshit from sales and marketing material.
Yeah.
And I do think those are like still important and still needed, but like they don't work. They don't work on develop. Like, and the word I think of all the time is trust. Like, I think if a sales or marketing person walks into the room when you're like evaluating a new tool, like developers just shut down. I think you really need someone who can like speak their words and like be a trusted resource. But this is why I think it's so important, like what metrics you're being judged on professionally impact your ability to do your job, especially as a developer advocate. Like I don't get judged on my ability to sell a tool. Like my tool may not be the best way to solve your problem. And you need to be able to like trust that I'm going to help you solve the problem regardless of whether that's our product or not. You know what I mean?
Totally. It really is. And I think one thing that really helps, with your reputation is that you actually have a computer science degree and you've got the chops to do it. So, one thing that I wanted, and the kind of the thing we were going to move this conversation around was your journey into tech appears pretty intentional. What has changed in the last decade around, for starters, hiring for tech roles, but also how you step into tech and grow one's career in the industry?
Oh, yeah. Great question. So background on me too, I was actually the lead technical instructor at one of the top 10 best developer boot camps. And I was living down in Honolulu, Hawaii. And when I graduated from college, like boot camps weren't a thing. It didn't exist. There was a couple self-taught engineers, but it's mostly CS majors. And obviously the industry's been kind of changed massively by the boot camp model kind of growing up. And obviously like being that lead technical instructor at a boot camp, I have massive success stories of my students, getting jobs at Microsoft and Google and all the big companies and small startups or, whatever, making their own companies. I don't know. And so like the three main ways of getting into tech today are traditional computer, like 4-year computer science degree. You get a boot camp or you're self-taught. And all of them are legit ways to get into tech. And for me, I think the key thing too is just like understanding what you need. Like, obviously there's time and money constraints around different ones. And like, if you self-taught, it may take you 7-8 years before you get a job. Boot camps are a little bit faster. They're obviously expensive. I'm spending probably $10,000 to $15,000. And then of course, colleges can take 2 to 4 years, and it can be, I don't know, depending, $15,000 to $100,000 or maybe even more to graduate, right? I don't know. I don't even like locally in the Twin Cities here too. I'm like, the bootcamp model is a legit way to get a job in the Twin Cities. I think it's still kind of slowly moving up. Big tech companies are still kind of struggling, I think, to adopt that model. Sometimes it depends, but I don't know. It really depends. It really depends on like what you want to do. I think the key too is just like liking it. If anyone's like listening to this and like thinking about whether they want to get into programming, I would suggest like try it out. Try to do as many free things online as possible to determine whether you want to do it or not. I will say too, I started programming and I hated it. I was so bad at it. I got my 4-year computer science degree. All of my computer science professors would be absolutely appalled that I was talking to you right now, Tim, about getting into programming.
Same.
Yeah. I sucked at it. I hated it. I didn't understand it. It was too abstract and theoretical. It wasn't practical. And I just struggled with school. And it wasn't until I graduated where I like started to enjoy programming, when I could like explore it on my own.
I'm really glad that I met somebody else who like suffered through computer science school, and I'd sit in class and hear terms being thrown around like big endian and, floats and all these things where I'm like, I've been programming for a really long time, but the things that in Seaside, what computer science programs teach you is that theoretical, like the old joke of, teaching rocks how to think. That's effectively what computer science is. And that part to me was never really the interesting part of software development. The interesting part was actually getting to see what you do on a screen or in your hand and tap and things happen. So, when you're talking about what's changed over the last several years with getting into this space, I think it's that the tooling and the ways that you go about building software have become way, way easier to understand. And once you and be able to actually go from not knowing anything to that fun experience of seeing something going in your hand. Because it's when you're talking about careers, I think, I've always thought being a doctor would be really cool, but I also don't like reading like books. And so that's kind of a problem. Same with being a lawyer. Like I don't like sitting and reading legal briefs. I love, but so it's the same with development. Like if you want to do it, I think your advice is spot on. Like go and try it and see if you actually like it. And if the spark is there, then just can, determine whether you want to go down and learn the theory behind all this stuff, which would be the traditional 4-year program. Or if you actually want to get going, go to a technical school or go to boot camp. Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I wish more colleges did take advantage of the practical side of software development, like making a visual web app or something like that instead of, I don't know. I struggle with that. I'm sure I'm not the only one. So many people struggle with just staying engaged with something that's so theoretical. And I think it gives programming the impression that you need to be good at math in order to be successful at it, which isn't true at all. I do very little actual math day to day. Not saying that old programming doesn't require math. There certainly are jobs that do, but most of them don't. Yeah, I don't know,
Oh yeah, there's certainly applications where you do need to know math. I'm thinking of like one developer I know was really interested in building a watch widget for the Apple Watch that showed the moon, like what phase the moon was in, and they wanted to have the picture of the moon be accurate. So like when you look up in the sky, it would show exactly the kind of moon you were doing. Well, he had to learn like this whole lunar math, like all this crazy. He was going into like PhD level math to be able to write the correct algorithm to do it. And it's like if you were to just start at the beginning and have to learn that lunar math and sit there and be like, why am I learning this crap? You probably would burn out really quick. But the fact that he's like, no, I want to get this right, and it causes you to ask questions and get curious. Like, I think that's the best way to becoming a programmer.
No, I totally agree with you. And that's what I always tell people too. It's like everyone learns differently, and the important part is to know how you learn. But for me, I have to pick a project that I'm interested in order to like be successful learning a new tool or technology. And like, lunar cycles isn't my thing, but like if that's your thing, go make that thing, go learn it. And I like to throw new tech into that. I have this problem I want to solve. And then I'm going to go Google the shit out of that as I figure out how to make that thing,
Yeah.
And that's how I learn.
and I think that's one thing that, it goes underscored as a developer. And when you're first jumping into this space, I think people have this conception that it is a lot like wizardry, where you're kind of saying the right incantation and then something magical happens, where it's more like when you're looking at something like out of Hogwarts and the kids are zapping stuff and things are exploding and they're turning into cats and there's all this chaos going on. It's a lot more like that when you're starting, where you're just spending so much of your time bashing your face into the keyboard, trying to figure out why is it not doing what it says it does, and why does it just keep saying syntax error? That's not helpful at all.
You know what I see in a lot of tech? I think tech especially, but all things. It's I think juniors have a hard time understanding how failure is a part of the experience of learning it. They see a error message as a sign that they're stupid and a failure, not as a part of the journey of actually programming. And I see that even with developer advocacy. I speak a lot of conferences, and people don't see getting rejected from 50 conferences before you get accepted into one as part of the journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that makes it hard for people. I just the nature of programming is very failure oriented. And I think people don't see that side of it. I think it's important to share that that's accepted and okay. And that's part of programming. You know what I mean? Make it
yeah.
I even flip it to especially specifically with public speaking. I, instead of trying to get an X number of conferences I'm getting into, I try to get as many failures as I can a year. I think I'm going for 100 rejections per year right now. So I'm that, which incentivizes me to apply to bigger conferences than I think I could probably get into. More ambitious, and then I might actually get one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then but it's worked well. But even I don't know. I feel there could be an equivalent for getting bugs is a sign of success while you're programming, as opposed to a sign of failure or being dumb or not good enough.
Oh yeah. I think with developing, I find that you spend 80% of your time just mad and frustrated and tired, and you're going through this big trough of depression. And then, but the 20% where things do go right and do go well are so rewarding, and you get so high off of that success that that's kind of what, for me at least, keeps me going through when I'm stuck on a tough problem, is knowing that as soon as it's licked and I figured out all of the right ways to get around whatever I'm dealing with, at the end of that is this moment of euphoria. And that's something that I think newer developers could, it's like you said, it's something that you kind of have to learn and feel if that's something that is right for you. If you like having predictable success happening every time, your software development probably isn't the right industry for you.
Oh, I totally agree. You know what this makes me think of too is also you can work in tech and not be good at programming. I had a lot of students of mine at my bootcamp that were not great programmers, but they ended up being even that experience of going through the bootcamp made them really successful at their other jobs. Project management or being a business analyst or product owner or product, you know what I mean? Even having that, being able to having a basic understanding, or even design, right? Some of the best designers I have a basic understanding of HTML and CSS, and maybe even some JavaScript, to help understand how to make the designs work better with engineers. I don't know. You know what I mean? You can still get into tech without being good at programming too. That shouldn't be a barrier either.
I think it's just when you go and get your driver's license and you learn how to drive a car, you're not going to be driving Formula One race cars right out of the gate, right? Yeah. You got to start somewhere. And I think most people are never going to drive a Formula One race car, right? But at least knowing how the car works even if it's just at a level of accelerate, slow down, turning, understanding the rules of the road, just having that base understanding of how cars work is so helpful in so many other areas of your life. And I think with programming, if you can at least learn a little bit, enough to know make it so it's not that whole Moses descending from Mount Sinai with the 10 commandments, or a wizard going into a cave, whatever. That's how I feel a lot of people think of technology, is that it's just this irreproachable, unlearnable thing. And once you understand that it's really not that really anyone can at least grasp the basics of it. Once you have that base level, then you can take that knowledge and apply it to anywhere else in tech. And like you said, have a pretty successful career.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. You can't go wrong understanding how computers work today,
Right.
Even just have a computer at your own home. I feel like it's just not a bad skill to have. That being said, I don't think everyone needs to learn how to program, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Like, whoops, you accidentally learned how a computer works. Like, whoops, dang it. Shucks, this will be not useful at all. I don't know. I think there's a strong push. Like a lot of parents are trying to get all their kids to learn how to program, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea either, but understanding how computers work, I think, is a good idea.
I think there's a difference between knowing how to build and design software versus how to use software. And basic tech literacy is absolutely something that everyone needs to understand. There's so many debates, think of political, or think of just in your own internal company. There's so many issues around technology that just are people's concerns are born out of ignorance. And if you just took a minute to understand what encryption is and what it means and how you can't just design a backdoor into it that only special people can access, it's that's not how math works. I think that just understanding those basic things, because I don't understand how encryption works, but I at least understand the downsides to putting a backdoor in an end-to-end encryption scheme.
No, totally.
It's little things like that I think if more people understood and had that literacy, we'd be in a much better place.
My worst fear in life is to look like one of the congressmen or senators who's grilling the CEO of Google or Facebook and having no idea what they're talking about.
Senator, we sell ads.
Yeah, exactly. What is Finsta? I don't want to be that senator when as I get older. Having a basic literacy is probably important.
Oh yeah, the Finsta thing actually threw me off because I was I thought it was something with fintech because I just saw the meme and I'm that was my old person moment. That and lately I've been tapping my foot along to a lot of when I'm at a gas station, for example, and there's music playing overhead. I'm hey, this is actually a pretty good song, and I'm oh no, that music is designed to appeal to a certain aesthetic, and now I'm in that demographic where I'm tapping my foot along.
I've been targeted. I feel the same way. Every time there's an Instagram ad that is actually something I want, I feel awful. It's targeting it. It knows me too well, and I feel shame.
Well, there's no shame in that. That's how the algorithms work. So it's just it just means that the algorithms are working.
Exactly. Yeah.
There's actually, we've been talking about this. There's a blistering hot job market right now for tech. And I think demand for developers is even higher than before the .com boom. If at least if you're a mid to senior level developer. But I think one area and where I kind of wanted to focus the rest of our talk today was around junior developers. Why do you think it's hard for junior developers to break into tech?
I would love to hear your thoughts on this too. I think there's two prongs. First is it's companies don't want to invest the time into training up junior engineers. They want someone to hit the ground. They don't have the infrastructure set up for it. They don't have the resources set up for it. It's go, just pump out feature farms, right? There's just no time to slow down and help a junior engineer out. And then two is juniors don't know how to market themselves to make themselves appealing to a company that might be looking for someone. I think companies are looking for them, just juniors don't know what to do to stand out or be interesting, right? It's if I go to a boot camp or I go to do a Code Academy course, I'll get hired. No, you're going to need to do some different stuff or position it or fix up some of your stuff to make you look more appealing. And it is tough right now too. There's been talk for years now of the oversaturation of juniors from the bootcamp market. I think bootcamps are pumping out junior engineers. And if I'm honest too, bootcamp grad students are very hit or miss on where their abilities are, whether they're going to be a good fit internally. You do need to do a certain amount of assessing to see if they're a good fit. Just having graduated bootcamp is not enough for me to assume that you're going to be a good team member. So it's like, yeah, it's just like an oversaturation of the market, and then like not knowing how to do it, and then companies also being hesitant to hire and support people. I'm curious, does that resonate with you, or do you have any other thoughts about what you think might be stopping that up?
I think those are probably the big ticket ones. I mean, it's I think a lot of times, again, we kind of in our industry think that we're cutting edge and state of the art, and that we're above any other type of thing that's ever happened in human history of people organizing together to solve problems. One thing we've been trying to do in our company is try to take a look at other industries and how they bring up junior talent, and one area that we've been focusing on heavy at Jed Mahonis Group has been kind of taking it like how an electrician would rise through the ranks. So you typically, like, if you're going to have a new, let's say you're building out a giant warehouse, you wouldn't have a apprentice come in and lay everything out and get going, which is what I think a lot of times in tech, a lot of companies will just hire a junior developer because they just have the word developer in their name and say, go forth and build this scalable system to support millions of people, where they clearly should not be doing that. In an electrician metaphor, in that kind of mental model, you've got a master electrician who will go in and lay out how all of the wires will go in, what gauge they are, all of that stuff. They'll kind of lay out the whole building. Then you bring in a journeyman who will come in and actually do the work. They'll put in the circuit breaker, they'll run the cables, they'll run everything. And then they'll bring in an apprentice to be watching the whole time, but also they'll be screwing in like faceplates and putting in light switches and doing the like very easy basic stuff to get them going and expose them to new problems and things like that. And that kind of mental model is what we've been trying to do with our group, is make sure that we are keeping our senior developers doing senior developer tasks, having our junior developers available to do the junior developer tasks. And then the mid-level people are really doing the grunt of the work while, helping kind of train up the people under them and also taking direction from people that are above them.
Yep. No, I love that. No, I totally agree. I mean, that should be the depth of, like, I'm imagining like a pyramid or triangle shape, right? Like you have leads who are kind of helping keep things moving and blocking people, but mids and juniors kind of helping, supporting each other, but kind of doing the actual day-to-day programming work. But everyone's kind of guiding and helping there, and you have that like depth.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important too. We talk a lot about supporting juniors, but we never talk about how juniors can help support your team, like your mids and senior members too, by like, because like leadership is a huge part of growing as professionally. And like, I think a lot of engineers want to be in the position where they're mentoring and growing and helping guide and like other team members, right? Like that can be, you can help grow your team internally and like make more fulfilling careers for your team by having junior engineers for your team to help support, it's a win-win.
It really is. I think one other thing that kind of just came to my mind too, and I wanted to throw it out before I forget it, was, when I was learning web development, it was back in like 98, 97, like sometime in that time frame, there was not much to it. Like it was very easy to, right click and view source. And there were like different things that it was so easy to build a website, and, they looked easy as well. Like the quality that I could do as a third grader was as quality as the Space Jam website could do, like we were not that far apart where I think, I've had 25 years to build on that experience and come up with Flash and jQuery and like, kind of go through the ranks to now React and Vue and everything else that's out there. Where coming in today, you kind of have to get like dropped into the middle of like, it's like you're watching this soap opera unfold for 25 years. You're just starting at the last episode and you have no context for all of the stuff that's come before you. And I think part of the problem is that we kind of drop junior developers into, hey, build a Docker application that can scale with all of this and do all of that. And I'm still sitting here like as someone that's been doing this for a really long time and trying to keep up with all of the stuff that's coming out. But I at least have the benefit of being like, oh, okay, Docker is like, Capistrano, or it's like whatever. Like I can kind of walk back through the trace of all these products that have led to Docker, where a lot of junior developers, you just kind of get thrown into the crap and you have to figure it out.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I totally agree. A lot of the structure of the boot camp that I ran was kind of based on following the history of web development through like Web 1, Web 2, and then like programming models, right? Like, because I totally agree. I think we've had the benefit of seeing how it grows and kind of stepping through from a simple development cycle into like massively distributed web scale applications with like massive team members. But yeah, you're totally right. Getting thrown into that's wild, and you shouldn't. Like understanding why and how we got here is like, I think, important, that context. I'm not saying you have to know that all that history to like become a programmer, but like if you want to become a lead, I think it helps to understand the context and growth and kind of why we make these decisions.
Well, it's just like with that lunar math example from before too. Like you don't need, like, I think a lot of times when you're starting out in a field, you don't really know where to start and you don't know what is important. So you're kind of just absorbing all this information all at once. And it's so hard to parse through like, okay, do I actually need to know what a blink tag is? Or is that just a funny relic of the past? You know? I think that's probably a big chunk of it, is that it's hard to, again, when you're starved for developers, like, you know, the entire industry is, you kind of just want someone to be able to come right in and not have to get them caught up to speed. But I think we're thinking of the problem backwards, where we really do need to have like people sit down and help bring people into the space and say, you know, you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. Just focus on this thing. And then as you're going through this thing, you're going to get exposed to, you know, why is there a marquee tag in this, you know, code or whatever? And you're like, oh, okay, that was from this, and then that context all of a sudden makes a lot of sense. You just kind of have these facts thrown in the back of your brain that you need to recall on demand. It's so hard to just pull those up.
Oh, totally. I love that you brought that up about the just getting guidance on what's important or not important. And there's so many things. It depends on what industry you're in too, to kind of knowing what that looks like. And I think you're right. It gets very overwhelming. Actually, I call programmers who are jumping from this one shiny tool and technology to the next magpie programmers. Magpie birds are typically like drawn to shiny little things, right? But easily distracted. And it's hard to build depth or like a deep understanding of stuff if you're constantly jumping from one thing to the next. Yeah, and it takes time and kind of guidance on that too. And Tim, I'm sure you've been there too. I've been there too, like overwhelmed. There's just so much stuff. I don't know where to start. There's not enough time. I don't know what industry I'm interested in. I don't know what I want to do. I'm just kind of trying everything to figure out, just kind of get the lay of the land, you know?
It's funny you say that, like, because I think that's the question I wanted to actually bring up next was like, I think all of that is because people are trying to get experience and trying to figure out like, what is the right kind of experience and what do I need to learn? Like, what do you have on that front of like, how do juniors actually get the appropriate experience?
Oh, I know. Yeah. The worst, I see this too. So I have a lot of, well, I guess my like younger friends who are like coming out of college. I think they're like looking for a purpose and guidance on that. And the worst thing I've seen people do is just like sitting around at home playing video games and doing nothing and expecting this answer to come down, you know, like a shot of lightning to like infuse them with the knowledge of what their purpose is and what they like to do. But it doesn't happen, right? Like the best way to know what you want to do is to do something, just do anything. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be what you want to do. Worst case scenario, you learn what you don't want to do, right? Like it's like this, I hate this. Okay, cool. Now you know. I don't, especially when you're first getting started, I think the best thing to do is just kind of play around and explore. I like to have fun. I'm just working on like fun, goofy projects that I like. They don't even have to be good. You don't have to publish them. No one has to know about them. But like making something, you might make something interesting, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to make money. You don't have to make a business out of it. But just like playing around with new stuff. Personally, what I do now, I don't program all the time. Like in the summers, I don't program very much. I program mostly in the winter. And I like to do art projects or like digital humanity type projects personally. But every time I start a new project, I try to incorporate at least one new piece of technology into that stack so I can kind of explore what that looks like. I'm just like constantly, slowly kind of trying new stuff through time, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah. Learn by doing, I guess that's what I do. I don't know. Some people like videos. I don't. I'm probably one of the few people who makes more videos than they consume. I make them, but I do not watch them. I don't know what this says about me, but probably one of the few out there that says that. But I just like to make stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you learn new stuff? How do you pick up new stuff, Tim?
I think your points are absolutely right of how I consume content as well. You know, I can sit and watch a Go Rails video, for example. I think they make phenomenal videos, but at the same time, it's really hard to just kind of watch somebody else do it and then copy and paste the code and be like, all right, well, I copy and pasted some code that really didn't teach me much of anything. Yeah, I think the point you made about exploring, I mean, I think you should be exploring your curiosities is really the best way to get experience, because the in this space, in this market, with this time, where we're at in history, again, technology is everywhere, and everybody needs help with technology. It doesn't matter what kind of organization you're running. If your kid's soccer team, for example, needs a website, that's an easy way to go and explore. You don't even need to build a website. You can go to Squarespace or something, just like get a website started. And then when somebody says, hey, we should do this to the site, and you've hit your limits, explore that, dig into that, say, how can I get a calendar to embed on a website? Or how can I get, how can I integrate with this other scheduling program? And that might lead you down to APIs and learn how to interact with that. There's all kinds of problems out there in the world that can be solved with technology. And frankly, a lot of them have, as you quote unquote, the real problems we have in our lives have been solved with technology. At least people have tried to solve them with technology. Yeah. So there's all kinds of ways. If you see a problem, just go out and Google and find a GitHub repository that has that problem and try to read the source code, understand it, try to run it yourself and make changes to it and see what happens.
And totally. And if it's already been solved, who cares? Go solve it again. Like my first web app I ever built was a Twitter clone on Ruby on Rails. That's how I learned how to do servers and backends and MVC. You know what I mean? Twitter's solved. Who cares? I made a Twitter clone. I learned a lot. Awesome. You have a wedding coming up? Cool. Make a wedding register website or your wedding information website if you're anything. If you need something, go make it, even if it's solved or not. I don't know. Make it as easy or as hard as you want. And I totally agree with you. Like, if you make something, you start like getting down a rabbit hole a little bit, and you're like, oh, this feature would be cool. Cool. Figure it out. Go add it. Right. So I want to embed Google Maps on it. Cool. Give it a Google,
Go do it.
Yep, exactly. And it's so hard for me to tell, because people ask me that all the time, like, how do I learn how to program? And I sound like a pretentious idiot. I'm just like, how do you learn how to program? Like, go program something, which I don't know how helpful that is. I think there's an art to learning how to Google. There's an art to learning how to read documentation. And that can all be really scary too. I would encourage people to, as they're getting in there, to try to find peers that are doing it. And there's so many open source projects. There's a ton of developers. There's a ton of meetups. If you're listening here in the Twin Cities about learning how to program, start going to them. Get help, ask dumb questions. You know what I mean? You don't have to do it alone, but I encourage you to do something.
What do you think could be done to, from our high horse that we're riding on right now? What can we do to make life easier for juniors to get into our industry?
I think each of us has our own thing and own capacity. I have a small audience online, and I'm trying to use that platform to make it less scary. I want to try to be more vulnerable and showing the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into it. I think often with my job, we're producing demos or blog posts. It looks like I just come down with a fully formed working demo off the mountain, right? Like Moses, right? But there's not, right? There's a lot of bugs, a lot of Googling. That's why I do live streaming, to show all the bugs and errors I run into while I'm programming. I want to show that side of the process, the development side of it. And you've seen some of my TikToks. I try to be vulnerable about errors I run into or mistakes I've made while programming. And I try to do it with humor and jokes. But I'm not currently a tech lead. I was, though, at Best Buy. So I had a team I directly managed, right? There's a lot of things you can do if you're on a team and you're a mid or senior level member. Having good internal documentation about how your tools work, making it really easy to set up, having DevOps to make it really easy to deploy, and also making tests in place and enforcing those so that it makes it harder for juniors to fail or to cause a catastrophic failure before pushing out code. Teaching, sharing experiences, celebrating non-feature type work can be really important if you're a technical lead. Something I see a lot of organizations running into a lot is only celebrating major feature work and not celebrating, minor optimization wins or some bug fixes that maybe a junior did, right? Like the type of work you celebrate and compensate for also tells a lot about your culture and what can be celebrated. I don't know, just making it okay to like ask them questions, having an internal with some information source, like a Stack Overflow type thing internally to like answer questions, or a forum to have them questions, and also receiving feedback two ways, right? Like asking questions from juniors about what they need and want and what could be improved, and then trying to make the space and time for that to be improved. Depending on the size of your org, it's probably going to may or may not be in place. And that's okay, but working and showing that you're working on that can go a long way for helping make your lives of your junior engineers better, Yeah. What are you guys doing? Is there anything else you guys are doing at your company to like make that easier?
No, we hate juniors here. We don't do that.
I'm sure.
I don't. The thing with my company is, we're pretty small, and we haven't really. We're working on building out process right now to make it easier. And I think that's the first thing I think is being honest and upfront about what kind of support you have for juniors.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of times people like to say they're good with junior developers, but then when you actually talk to junior developers, they're less than impressed with what you've done for them. I think that one piece of advice that I took away, I can't even remember if it was from my time working with Prime or what, but they had somebody brought up that when you're working with somebody, and this could be in any context for anything, but especially in software development, I think a lot of times what happens is people feign surprise frequently, which what I mean by that is if let's say you have a junior developer and they're working on a new feature and they say, how do I do this thing? And you say, oh, just go on, XYZ website. And they're like, what's XYZ website? And you go, oh, you've never heard of XYZ website before? That feigning surprise, like everyone does it, right? We all do that. But what you don't realize is how it makes the other person feel. Because at best, you're not really, at best, it doesn't do anything. It just shows off how good you are and how much you know and how little the other person knows. At worst, you're making this person feel stupid and that they should know the answers. So I think there's little things like that of just how you interact with people when you're dealing with somebody that is asking you about questions that you know a lot about and they don't. That's one thing I've been working really hard at, is trying to meet people at their level. And instead of seeing somebody asking about such a thing and you say, oh, you've never heard about that, instead approach it with enthusiasm and say, oh yes, I get to explain this new thing to you that's about to blow your freaking mind. Here is this new thing that's going to open up your whole world. It's like, I think those kinds of interpersonal skills, I guess, are something that I've been working really hard at with our company, at least.
No, I love that. Having that empathy for like how responses and being talked to. Because you don't want to be condescending or, talk down to someone when they're like learning something.
Right.
What this all reminds me of too is there's a quote from Mr. Rogers. An interviewer asks him, like, how are you so good at talking to children? Like, how do you know what to do? And Mr. Rogers says, like, well, we've all been a child before. Like, it's just like tapping into that inner experience of how you wish you had been talked to as a child. And I feel like the same thing as a junior engineers, right? Like, we've all been in that position. Someone's taken a chance on you and I, Tim, to like learn new stuff. And like the content I'm creating today is stuff that I wish had existed when I was learning how to program. I'm making the thing that I wish I had. And it's not going to be the stuff I make doesn't work for everybody, and that's okay. But I'm trying my best, and I'm learning, and I'm getting feedback on what does or does not work. But I don't know. Just like remembering that all of us were new and someone took a chance on us, and like trying to remember what that feels like, I think is important, having that empathy.
Yeah, it's really stepping into. I know that there's something out there that I read recently about there's a term for the bias that once you learn something and you know something and you're a master of something, that it's so hard to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who is not in that position anymore. And that's what, like, I still volunteer with Prime Academy, and I've been doing this for so long now that when people are asking, like, okay, so how did you get into development? I'm like, well, I remember sneaking off to the library and checking out books on HTML and then reading them at church, like when I'm supposed to be singing along or whatever, but I'm sitting in the back just reading HTML books. That point of reference has zero relevance to like anybody anymore. Because who goes to a library, who buys a book, who, like the list goes on and on. So it's like the way that I learned is so completely different, but I still try to put myself in at least the mindset of I had a thing I wanted to build and I don't know how to build it. So I'm going to just try to open my mind and learn from as many sources as I can. And I think now that we have the internet, we have the ability, like, I think it's easy for senior developers to just say, go on Stack Overflow and do it. But for me, it's kind of like you said earlier of knowing what to Google for. I honestly think that's probably 95% of my job now as a senior developer, architect, whatever. I know what to Google for now, and I know how to get to a solution. Like the other day, I was working with a company that's building something with a Raspberry Pi and Python and a camera, and the developer was using this framework that I had never used before, had never encountered. And they're like, can you figure it out? And I was like, I'll take a shot. And I just kind of knew, because of how long I've been doing it, I knew what to Google for, and ultimately figured out what the problem was and showed it off to them. And I'm saying that not to pat myself on the back, but I'm saying it because I've done this long enough that I was able, the developer who had did this was junior. And instead of coming down on him and saying, why did you architect it this way? That's not the right way to do it. I said, okay, here's why the way you did it was wrong, just so you have that understanding. And then here's some possible ways of getting out of this problem. And he took that and went back, and he's currently fixing that up. And I hope at least that was more productive than me kind of coming in with my neck beard and telling everybody how great I am about programming.
Yeah, totally. No, I love that. That's amazing. Yeah, it's I just posted something on LinkedIn. It was there was a much better way of, like, a really great name for it, but it was like giving help without unasked for help, or like giving help in a way that no one wants or needs. I think it's a hard time for programmers. We're just used to kind of saying, I don't know, the solution, or kind of walking someone through it too. But maybe that they didn't ask to, or trying to give feedback in the way that they want. I think you're right. The best way to know how to do that is to just ask, like maybe a junior developer is just like complaining about something and they just need to vent.
Yeah.
Ask to see if they actually want help on it. Or, are they looking for a solution? Do they want to spend more time on it? Like asking for what they need can be really helpful and go a long ways. I don't think we do that enough.
Oh, yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of times it's, again, in this market, everyone has so much tech work to get done, and we don't actually take the time to train people on how to get caught up to speed. And it's one of those things where it does suck sometimes to have to sit down and explain to a junior developer how to do A, B, and C. And especially when you have timeline pressures that you're trying to get something out the door. But the more I've been doing this, the more I've been realizing that if you take that like 20 minutes to sit down and explain something to somebody and you set them off on the path, then all of a sudden it frees you up to be able to do stuff down the road. You now have somebody that is built up to be able to do those things. So I guess I think what can be done, going back to the original question, what can be done to make it easier for juniors is for us to just get over our egos and actually meet people at their level and help them figure out how to get into this space.
Tim, engineers don't have giant egos. We're famously known for being very
humble,
having a lot of being self-critical. No, you're totally right. We need to get over our egos. Absolutely. I was thinking too, like, I think it's up to like seniors and technical leads to advocate for that time for their junior engineers. I think a lot of times I see like, oh, we just hired X blah, 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 and they're slow and can't figure things out. Like, it's up to you to advocate for that time, either for you to like get to train them up or create materials to help them, or just to directly help them. Because juniors, I think, have a hard time advocating and may not understand. They'll probably blame themselves. And like some juniors just won't get it, and that's fine too. But like, give them a shot. You got to like give that time and help fight for them if you can.
Well, I think one thing I've been trying to work through in my own life has been thinking more of myself in the way a doctor thinks of themselves. I think a lot of times people come to developers and say, this is how we need to do it. It's A, B, C, D, and E, where I don't think, maybe I'm in the wrong, but I would never go to my doctor and say, there's this rash on my arm. I know for sure it's this. So you need to prescribe that. It's like, that's not how it works. And I think that from in this particular standpoint, if you are a senior developer and you've got a team of junior developers, I think it is your duty and responsibility to go to people higher than you and say, hey, we need to set up a better program for A, B, and C. And you need to help me carve out time in my schedule so I can support these people and help them get caught up to speed. And that's only going to help everybody in the long run. It can't necessarily, it shouldn't come from the top down in that regard. I think it should, but if it's not, then it needs to be from the bottom up and help explain to your bosses that we need to have these programs in place.
Yeah, totally. I feel like without that pushback, the business will just continue to ask you to produce more business features, which is fine. That's their job, but it's also our job to help advocate for what we need to, right?
Yeah.
We need better testing. We need a better DevOps flow. We need to support our juniors. We need documentation. We need to refactor this. Like, the business won't know, and they'll continue to just consume your time unless you are advocating for that.
100% agreed.
It's dangerous to wait for the business to make good decisions for what your team needs, because it won't happen. It won't happen. I guarantee you.
It won't.
You're going to be very sad. Right. Yeah, you're going to have over and over again. It's like you got to advocate for it, man. You got to be strong in that regard. That's hard. It's pushing back. I've gotten like some nasty fights with product and bosses before around advocating for things we need to. And it can say a lot about the culture too, with like if it's okay to ask that kind of stuff too, you know?
Oh yeah. And it's a lot of the stuff where it's like, I always say it's kind of like going to the dentist and getting the question of, have you been flossing? Where a lot of time, I mean, maybe some people are perfect at it. I certainly am not. I'm terrible at it, and I know I should be doing it, but here we are. A lot of times you have to go in and be the dental hygienist and make people feel uncomfortable for having bad practices and find ways to floss more.
You got to totally bring up uncomfortable stuff is hard. I mean, that's part of being a senior engineer too. It's just like, you see some technical problems or production went down and there's security flaws. You gotta there might be some uncomfortable conversations you gotta have. And that's part of why we get paid, you know?
Exactly. Last question for you, Joe. And it's kind of a 2-part question. So it's kind of the summation of all of what we've been talking about. So what advice would you have for junior developers right now in the fall of 2021? And then in parallel, what advice do you have for companies that are hiring tech talent right now?
Fall 2021, Tim, I don't know if you've seen this, like nationally, the tech market has fundamentally changed in the last 3 months from what I've seen. I just switched jobs a couple months ago and I got a massive pay raise. And I think across the board, demand has only gotten higher. It was already high before. It has gotten higher. And I think it's affecting everyone, and that it's trickling down to the junior market too. I'd say even if you've been at a job for about 2 years, 100% look for, like, anyone, if any skill level, look around for a new job. Juniors, I guarantee you are being underpaid. I guarantee you, if you've been at a job for 2 years, you're being underpaid. Look around. Money's not the most important thing in the world, but it is nice. Having more money is nice. Look around for new jobs. And if you're a company hiring right now, again, the market has fundamentally changed. Look at how much you're paying your engineers. I guarantee you that they're being underpaid, and you need to look at you may need to adjust your pay raise or your pay market. It's the market is insane right now, for sure. The other thing, juniors, just have a decent portfolio. If you don't, just have a decent GitHub and make sure your READMEs are great. Make sure that it makes it easy to set up, and you have working links to your product or your work doing whatever it does. The worst thing I can see is a GitHub full of half-finished projects with no links and no documentation how to get their projects working. I want to see some interesting work after you graduate from a bootcamp or whatever. I think that's about it. Look around. The market's wild right now. Look around.
I think from the both sides, I guess, it's this point in history that very rarely happens for any kind of class of employee, where you really do have the pick of the litter. And I think that, like you said, money isn't everything. There are obscene amounts of money being thrown around for jobs right now. But that being said, everyone is throwing around obscene amounts of money. And what you really need to be, basing your job search off of is culture and finding companies that will care about you more than just giving you the money is kind of a baseline thing at this point. What you really want to do though is not step out of a situation that's good for you right now and then into another one that's really crappy for you for one reason or another. It's hard to kind of gauge that, but that's one thing, like I would say, like for advice for companies hiring right now is do those things that we've been talking about throughout this whole episode. Like make sure you've got like good support in place for juniors. Make sure that you're listening to your team when they tell you that you've got technical debt and you need to invest in making your stack more secure.
Oh, I totally agree.
Joe, this has been incredible. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk. How you mentioned it at the top of the show, but just in case now you've won more people over, how can people get in touch with you and follow you on all the socials?
Yeah. No, my name is Joe Karlsson, work for SingleStore. Check out singlestore.com. We're a database for data intensive applications. So if you've maxed out your database, your relational database, you should for sure check us out. 2, I'm on all of the socials. You can check out, I'm on TikTok. I make funny tech videos, Twitter, please follow me there, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, all the things. I would love to hang out there. Best place to follow me is probably on Twitter or LinkedIn, honestly. You should go check those out too. Again, it's Joe Karlsson, JoeKarlsson.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Absolutely, Tim. This has been amazing.
Thanks to Joe Karlsson for joining me on today's podcast. You can learn more about him at joekarlsson.com. Show notes for this episode can be found at constantvariables.co. You can get in touch with us by emailing hello@constantvariables.co. I'm at Tim Bornholdt on Twitter, and the show is at CV_podcast. Today's episode was produced by Jenny Karkowski and edited by the quick-witted Jordan Doust. Like I mentioned at the top of the episode, if you could take 2 minutes to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, we will give you a mention in a future episode as a thank you. Visit constantvariables.co/review and we'll take you right there. This episode was brought to you by the Jed Mahonis Group. If you're looking for a technical team who can help make sense of mobile software development, give us a shout at jmg.mn.